Welcome to Launch Codes, the podcast about MOPS, AI, and more. Each week you're going to hear from experts, and they're going to share their insights, stories, and strategies with you. Welcome to episode 2. I'm your host, Joe Peters, and today I have my colleague, Senior Director, Matt Tonkin here. And Matt, what are you excited about us covering today?
So I think most for me is talking about HubSpot inbound and some of the things that went on there. It's been a little bit, we're a little bit out from there now. Unfortunately, I was sick last week, so I wasn't able to record with you. So I've had some time to sort of digest this and think about this. So I'm pretty excited about that. And then towards the end, we're going to be doing some pairings that you and I have provided. So I'm excited to share that there, but I'll leave the surprise out for that.
Awesome. Some of those pairings are not good for your waistline either.
Never.
Anyway, okay, so we're going to talk about a few things today. First, this AI evolution model that I'm a little bit obsessed with, and going to get Matt's take on things. We're going to also answer some questions from the MOPS community. So, a question for Matt to tackle. We're not putting him on the spot. He's got a chance. He's had a chance to review it in advance. And then there are some headlines around AI and marketing, and we're going to cover those at the end in our sort of rapid fire section of the podcast. So let's get started. One of the things that I've been slightly obsessed with is the AI evolution model within organizations. And what I mean by that is how organizations are going to adopt AI and when they're going to adopt AI and what that's going to look like. So if we really think about it and take it from an organization's perspective. So imagine I'm a CMO of a large enterprise. I've got a lot of things to think about right now in terms of when and what we're doing with AI. So right now, I might be thinking about things like privacy, experimentation, maybe some guidelines and principles. I might be thinking of governance or the general AI literacy of my team. Kind of think about those in kind of that experimentation mode. But I think the next preoccupation that I'm a little bit obsessed about is the whole area of preparation, okay? And how data needs to be prepared moving into this AI adoption phase. Because no one's making a big call right now that they're going to go deep into ChatGPT or the OpenAI model, or they're going to go with Google, or they're going to go with Cohere, or any of the other providers that are making splashes right now. But it's what are you doing right now to get prepared? What do you think about that, Matt?
Yeah, it's interesting because that's sort of this topic that's not unique to AI, right? We keep hearing that like data preparedness. The cliche phrase is garbage in, garbage out. And it's interesting to think like how does that apply to AI? Because I've sort of seen this in the past with other tools where I think a lot of people think, this is just going to solve all your problems. This tool A comes in and great, we're going to use this, and you see the demo and everything. And the reality when you get it set up is that if you didn't plan for it and prep for it, it's not going to work how you expect. And I see a lot of similarity, I think, in AI and these tools. I think a lot of people think like it's going to solve everything off the bat. And AI probably has a lot more flexibility in being able to counter for some of that dirty data and the junk stuff in there. But I can definitely see like if what you have in your systems that you're feeding into this tool isn't useful, it's not going to be able to give you the results you want.
Exactly. And we've been talking about dirty data for years,
Oh yeah.
right? if not even a decade now, pretty much since marketing operations started coming into play, we've been dealing with data challenges. And so I really think that for organizations to get their house in order as it pertains to their data, whether that's cleaning and pre-processing or figuring out your data warehousing play. Like, where's this all going? Um, what does that look like for real-time processing or batch processing? Like, how is this all being thought through? So when you're doing your AI adoption and starting to train your own LLM, let's say, what are you training it with? And what's the state of readiness that you have right now in either marketing operations or marketing writ large if you're that CMO
Mhm.
of a mid-market or enterprise organization?
Definitely. And with that dirty data, a huge part of that is always scaling. Is always, you can have clean data at one size, but how do you get that growth? And with AI, whatever form of growth you're going to have is exponentially bigger. So it just heightens that if you can start with something early and get that structure in place, you're going to be well ahead.
Exactly. And, you know, we've been dealing with data privacy for a long time and, international standards, whether it's, whether it's European or North American standards, how many of those, I, how many of those preference centers have we set
Oh
up,
yeah.
Matt? Yeah.
Oh, exactly right. And there's so many variations, and being able to standardize for global organizations is, I mean, it keeps us in business.
Yeah, exactly. But whether it's GDPR we can only expect, and while they probably are lagging out, there are going to be new data privacy standards that are going to come into play. 100%. Uh, whether it's pertaining to personal information or to copyright information. There's going to be a whole legal switch here too. So keeping your ear to the ground as a CMO is also going to be important here. But I think that idea of data privacy is probably over-indexed right now from reality because it's always a thing and people don't want everything trained with their confidential proprietary information. But imagine you're training your own private LLM, then you're not as concerned there, but there's still going to be challenges and issues you need to think through as it pertains to privacy and what you're training with.
Yeah, it's a good point in that, these aren't new issues. These are things that companies have already been fighting and battling with. Internal private information, whether it's, fear of cybersecurity attacks or things like that. That doesn't The core concept doesn't change. It's just how you're using the tools and how you're protecting yourself.
Right. I One of the things that I'm kind of slightly obsessed with, and we have a little chart here that there'll be a few blogs coming out of this over the next little while, is this idea of if you think of a simple chart where you have your x-axis, and let's just pretend your x-axis is time, so change over time, and then your y-axis is an increase in AI innovation. And then if you were plotting on that risks and benefits, you could imagine that benefits are going to increase over time with increases in innovation. That's kind of like a pretty easy thing to follow. And you would presuppose that if we're going to have the exponential growth in AI innovation, that everyone is pretending that risks might start high, but they can't actually move at that same exponential level for an organization. So when we have that tipping point where the benefits and the risks cross,
Mhm.
and then you're moving into a place where the benefits are really outweighing the risks to the organization. That's going to be that sweet spot. That's going to be that tipping point for each organization to consider. But and I think this is like wrapping a bow on this
Mhm.
here. If you have your data ready, then when you want to take advantage of those benefits, when you see those innovations that are directly going to improve your operations or your outcome for your organization, you're ready to go.
Do you think that for each organization too, there might be multiple of those same charts at, you know, but for different purposes for, average employees, like the just asking questions into chat GTP, there's a certain level of risk to that, sure, but it's much lower than maybe full on implementation of a very large
Yeah.
native LLM or something like that. So there's almost like you're going to have to look at that from so many different perspectives as well.
Yeah, but if you think of like something like whether it's Google's Duet for the Google Work space or Microsoft Copilot, whenever that comes out, and you know, you're 1,000 person, 2,000 person organization, and you're going to decide to turn on 30, 40, $50 a seat per month AI integration into your suite. You could those are going to be those are going to be the big
Yeah.
questions. Like who's ready? That's just a training and literacy and people being ready for it that way. That's not even thinking about using creating your own LLM or anything like that. Anyway, we can, as Matt knows, we can talk about AI
Oh
forever.
yeah, Joe can talk about AI literally forever.
All right, let's just slide into our second segment here on, continuing our train of thought on AI. But Matt, what were some of the big things that you took away from Inbound now that we have you on the podcast?
Yeah, glad to actually be able to share my thoughts on it a bit later than I expected, but happy to be doing it now. I mean, first and foremost, continuing from what we were talking about before, everyone said just get using AI. So obviously that's sort of the key thing. But I think one of the things that came up was this concept of, will AI replace our jobs? And you know, if it does, what's that going to look like? It's a natural fear for, I think, a lot of people, especially creators, to think, suddenly is this machine doing my job better? And that's
Yeah.
that's not a new fear, right? That's been going on for centuries. And the quote that I think really stood out to me was, "AI will take your job and give you a better one."
Yeah,
Um,
dude, I don't know about that one. What do you think?
well, I know you and I have had a different read on that, and I've had some time to think about it. And I mean, I think the first part, AI will take, at least will take jobs. I don't know if we can say your job and be so granular with it, but I think that's fair, right? AI is going to take jobs.
And
Um,
we're already seeing it in the
yeah,
journalism space, right? So
exactly.
when people are like, "Oh, AI isn't taking as many jobs as we thought," well, then talk to some media organizations and people who are working there and see what they think about that.
Yeah, it is going to take jobs. So I think the part where it's open for argument is this: is it going to give you a better job, or is it at least going to make your job better? And this idea of how you use a AI to make your job better and not lose out. And one of the, oh, sorry, Joe, I think you were gonna say,
No,
you're gonna.
like I think the one thing that you're getting at here that I really like is it can make your job better by doing maybe some of the repetitive things that you don't like doing, or some of the heavy lifting
Yeah,
things that we all have to do sometimes. And I think that that's the case. But remember, we heard that other presentation where I think it was a woman from Jasper,
yeah,
and it was one of the more profound statements in the sessions that I attended. She said, "Okay, it's going to free up more
yeah,
time, maybe making your job better because you don't have to do all these repetitive things. But what are you going to do with your free time?"
yeah, yeah. That was huge, right? And that's so clear. If suddenly a task that used to take you 8 hours is suddenly taking you two, you have that 6 hours to do what? That's the question, right? That's the big question: is it to do more of what you're just doing? Is it to find a way to make what you're doing better? The way it really tied and resonated with me was when I actually went to the HubSpot booth and saw some of the demos of the new AI, generating content on landing pages. And I flashed back to, let's not date myself too much, but I flashed back to when I was actually essentially a one-man marketing team for a small startup. I was going to trade shows for them. I was running the HubSpot instance. I was running Google AdWords, and thinking about getting a campaign out the door, building the emails, building all this content, and that would take me, several days. and it's a one-man team, and it's like the end of the week I'm like, yay, I got this one campaign out the door. To think that I could probably have done all that work if I had the HubSpot AI stuff that is coming out now. I could have done that in a couple hours, and
Yeah.
then how much more I could have done, how much, I could have done to expand on that really took me back. And then thinking, okay, I'm not just executing emails anymore. What's that same wow moment except in my current role? And
Yeah.
that's something I still need to figure out.
I think one of the things that we're going to see is, and this was kind of easy to predict, is the tsunami of content that we're going to be exposed to. So if it's easy for everyone to generate it, rate it, say, in your HubSpot instance, and your campaign assistant is helping you generate your emails, your landing pages, and your ads, well, okay, how are you breaking through? And I think we saw that a really cool. There was a session on the pyramid of content. Do you want to dive into that? I love that.
Yeah, it was a really great visualization for both modern current like content structure and what we're looking at going forward. And if you think about it as almost like the oh, and I'm blanking on it, but the hierarchy of needs structure. Like
Maslow's.
there we are. Yep, exactly. So you can think you can see this like bottommost tier, which is what they defined as lazy content. So essentially the stuff that, for lack of a better term, is kind of junk content. It's just the stuff that's filler and it's there. And then you have the more executional side, and that makes up the bulk of the pyramid, which is, it's good content and it's getting out there, it's doing what it needs to do, but it's not, really turning the needle. It's not some amazing new advancement in terms of how you're communicating. And then that top small percentage of the pyramid is that more revolutionary content, that game changer stuff that really the real thought leaders are producing, and that good content.
Yeah.
And what AI is doing is it's not suddenly just generating those new ideas and those new thoughts for everyone. It's that supplement, and it's helping build that out. So it's really going to essentially eliminate that lazy content, because suddenly you have no need for that, right? Like anyone can create that lazy content using AI. So it really expands out that middle bucket where, it's the bulk of the content we're seeing, and it expands that exponentially.
Yeah.
But then you have that top of the pyramid where it's, okay, what's this good content that really is driving revolution?
Yeah.
And that's who's going to benefit the most, is the people who can really take that and go with it.
So great content isn't going to go away. It's going to be critical to breaking through, and that, as for marketers, is the critical insight here, which is, okay, you can join the tsunami, or you can be that surfboard on top of it. Okay,
Yep.
and unless you're thinking that way, it's going to be pretty hard to break through. But that's a good segue into our next segment in terms of breaking through. We have a new addition here, which are questions from the community, and we're going to put Mr. Tonkin's MOPS knowledge to the test. And so what we did is we went into the marketing ops professionals, their Slack channel, and for those of you that aren't familiar, you should really dive into this, marketingops.com. It's a great community, guys that are really, really dedicated to advancing the community. And so we chatted with Mike Rizzo, who's one of the who's the founder of the community, and asked him if we could take some questions that are being posed and answer them on the podcast, and he was really excited about that. And so we're going to do that today. And just one other plug for them, because we love them. Mopsapalooza is coming up in November in Anaheim. It's going to be a great group of people getting together, pretty much focused on marketing operations. And that's really different than, what we would have saw, say, at Inbound, Matt, or
Yeah.
what we even saw at Summit in March. this is really, really hyper focused for those of us in MOPS and are some of the burning issues and challenges that we're facing. So let's dive into the question. So we took this one, and we're not going to say who asked the question, but we will post this back in the community so they have it. So the question is, do you have any tips on how we can reduce the number of failed syncs?
Yeah.
Take it away, man.
And I'm gonna start by saying I'm gonna approach this primarily from a Marketo Salesforce perspective, and for context, the original question was sort of relating those two systems, but this is information that's pretty cross-platform agnostic. But I'll focus specifically on that, and I think the key thing is really figuring out causes first and foremost. Marketo has a notification platform where you can actually see what's happening and why, look into some of the details on why those syncs are happening. So generating your list of the whys, first and foremost, that's key. But there are some sort of general reasons why we see a lot of failures. One might be a difference in data structure from Marketo to Salesforce. One of the most common I think I'm seeing is restricted pick lists in Salesforce that are connected to fields in Marketo that are essentially free type. So, random data, and this goes way back to the dirty data we were talking about before, right? Where random information gets in, and Salesforce says, yeah, this isn't allowed, and breaks the sync. And because maybe that field is required, whatever the case is, looking at those rules and those validation rules are important. But it gets more complicated than that. You could run into situations where there's processes happening on the Salesforce side, whether it's like a validation process or some sort of data processing, whatever the case is happening. And while Salesforce is doing those processes, it tends to lock the object. And then if in that same moment of time, Marketo's syncing or doing something with the object, you can have that sync failure again. Sometimes it's going to be transient. A lot of other times it can be much more serious, and you're losing that data parity across the platforms.
And so how common is this, Matt? Like, should people be shaking in their boots when they see these errors, or what do you see?
Every instance is going to have errors, probably every day. There's going to be some errors. If you go into your sync logs, you'll see errors. It's not about who has it. It's about how detrimental it is to your operations. If it's, one field not getting written properly, and then it's a transient error and 5 minutes later it gets updated, the damage that's likely to cause is much lower than if you have 100 MQLs that just don't get pushed across the sales,
Right.
and then they sit there for 3 weeks before someone says, hey, what happened here? And your window of being able to, maybe have a good opportunity and have a conversation with a prospect is gone.
So how do you stay on top of it then? Like, where do you go?
Yeah. So in Marketo, there is the notification panel. There's a little bell notification icon on the top right. 100% the least utilized feature in Marketo, and I'm guilty of it too. The number just keeps ticking up, and then suddenly it's like, 600 notifications. Better check that. so check that daily. But I think, especially with larger orgs that have a larger marketing operations team, it's formalizing who's in charge of that, because a lot of the time it's just sort of there, and sometimes we click and see. But if you have someone who's in charge, or multiple people ideally who's in charge of checking, seeing where there's errors, seeing if it's something that's having an effect, that's sort of the key to staying on top of this. And this is a two-way thing too, where the sales ops team, that's where you see a lot of issues, is that MOPS and sales ops aren't communicating. So if you have different numbers, but you're not communicating that, you don't even realize it and don't know there's a problem.
So basically, improving communications and someone being on top of the bell, right?
Exactly.
All right. Well, I'm sure that will be hot content and a response that the community is going to love. So we'll be happy to share that there. Thanks, Matt. So just before we move into our hot take section, I just want to thank our sponsor, NAC, and they're the sponsor of today's episode. And for those of you that aren't familiar with them, NAC provides email and landing page creation for enterprise marketing teams, and no coding is required. That's their sweet spot there. So allows organizations to get to market about 95% faster with NAC. And Matt knows this. Think about template creation if you're coding away and how fast it can be done with NAC. And so learn more by visiting knak.com. That's knack.com. So let's move into our final section here before we have a little bit of fun. And this is an interesting article. We're always combing the universe for new articles on marketing ops and AI, and we like to discuss those here as well as in our newsletter for those of you that want to sign up for that, also called Launch Codes. But here's the headline: B2B should invest in these 10 channels in 2024. So according to 160 plus marketers, which is, what are those 10 channels? So started with SEO on top, blogging, search ads, website updates, social ads, and then it sort of goes on from there. But Matt and I both laughed at the SEO, and obviously we've all invested in marketing some significant time and effort on SEO historically. But when I see this type of article in this survey of 160 plus marketers, there are two questions I have. One, when was this survey done? Was it like March or February? Because two, where's AI coming into this play, and how does it affect some of those things? So, Matt, what's your take?
Yeah, I think I have that same sort of feeling with you. Is like how valid is this for any point in time? And before I get into the full take, I always want to stress too is don't look at these lists for your true like what you're gonna go to market with, right? Use your internal data and your attribution to figure out what's actually working for you. Probably SEO is important and all these other pieces, but really, dive into your own data first. But to your point, Joe, yeah, great. What's the new stuff that's coming out and changing? And I think
Yeah.
I've had this conversation about 3 times in the last 2 weeks, which makes me realize that more people are thinking about it. But okay, we have search engine optimization. Over the last few months, I rarely go to Google anymore unless it's something in the like after September 2021 or whatever the ChatGPT cutoff date is. I go and type it in there and I get feedback there, and that's becoming my new search engine in a lot of ways. So to me, it's not what's search engine optimization; it's what is AI optimization, and is that a thing, or is it going to be a thing, or is it already a thing and
100%
we
it's
got to
going to be
figure
a
it
thing.
out?
Yeah, 100% it's going to be a thing. I find it interesting because there's all these privacy and copyright conversations going on, and how everybody's updating their robots text files on their website saying, "Hey, we don't want you crawling our website." Well, what's that going to do in the
Yeah,
future for your AI optimization when your site hasn't been trained on the next LLM? Like, people have got to start thinking about this.
hmm and and thinking about how, right? There's not like, at least it doesn't feel the same as when we're like, oh, we gotta trick the Google algorithm into putting us first, right?
Yeah.
It does it. I mean, the concept feels like it should be the same, but there's this big gap that maybe we're just not there yet in our understanding of how we're going to, you know, how we're going to set our information that we're putting into these models out there, so that we come out when we ask, what's the best RevOps agency, Joe? What are we going to do to make sure that we're put out number one, right?
Yeah, well, I did a little bit of questioning to see where we stood, and we're definitely happy to be in the top three, which is pretty cool to see. But yeah, like, I think some of the things that are never going to go away is having high quality content that's resonating with your audience. Uh, the AI optimization is going to take that into account too. So if you're doing really great things and you're not doing the mail it in content, or that trying to get that content that really engages, is going to be just important in the future as it is today. But anyway, it's funny to see those lists, because the world is changing fast, and you've really got to keep your ear to the ground in terms of what that means for you and your organization. All right, let's shift gears quickly into what is a pretty funny thing that we saw last week, and that was Coca-Cola introducing a new mystery flavor made by AI. Matt, what does the future taste like?
I like this. I actually really do, but like it's in a weird way, because it feels gimmicky, and it feels like the company hopping on the trend, which is AI. But at the same time, the thing that hops into my mind is, Coca-Cola, how much resource is put into trying new flavors all the time. And
Yeah.
I can just picture this giant robot being like, oh, let's try these 3 flavors and get feedback from this test group. And then, oh, yep, that was good or not, right? Like that entire process of developing new flavors and new like foods, like fast food companies that put out 100 new products every 5 years and 2 of them make it.
Yeah.
Right, I can just see a whole area that's taken over by AI. In terms of this Coke, I want to try it. I'm interested to see.
We should have a
AI
live
is saying.
tasting on the podcast when
We'll
they
have our
come.
follow up. Yeah.
Hey, if you're in the US, it's available now. If you're in Canada, I think we have to wait till September 26th to get our
So par for
get
the
it into our
course.
hot little hands. But yeah, I love that they're not shooting for. They call it Y3000, which is the year 3000. So I love that they're shooting big too. Not the year 2100 or
Yeah.
2200, year 3000 flavor. That's pretty funny. But
Does it feel like a miss they didn't go Y3K? It feels like that to me.
yeah, we did invest a lot of resources in Y2K. That's for sure. All right. Well, let's move on from there into the final segment of this week's episode of Launch Codes, and that's into our pairing section. So, as always, I'm going to introduce an album, and you would have heard it at the intro, and we'll have it running in the background as well for you. But I love this album. It's by a group called Jungle. They started in 2013 in the UK, and they really have stolen some of the sounds of soul and funk from early eras, and every album is their masterpiece. Every one. And when I have it on in the background, people are like, "This is super cool. What is this?" And it really gets everybody in a sort of good mood, party vibe. And they did some cool vinyl on this one with an orange and white one. Kind of reminds me a little bit of a Pokemon a bit, but I had it as the orange for HubSpot last week, but I saved it for Matt for this week. So we have the album is called Volcano, just like our podcast Launch Codes. We're ready to explode here, and the track that you're hearing is Dominoes, which is another kind of fun play terms of getting everything in line and those dominoes cascading into each other. And we're starting to see the little pieces of marketing and AI intersecting now. So that was the thematic link to this week's episode. But let me turn it over to Matt, and he's going to share his part of pairings this week, and I'm pretty excited about it.
All right. Yeah, so first thing first for me is that I am a fan of craft beer. I also like to brew my own beer. My brother-in-law and I sort of pretend we're brewmasters. 60% of the time, you drink it because you made it and you feel proud of it, and occasionally you get one that you're like, oh, that's really good. But for me, the beer I'm going to show off, and it's actually not one I've had yet, is called Castronaut Session Hazy IPA. It's from Refined Fool Brewery out of Sarnia, Ontario. So the reason I chose this particular beer, and why it ties in well with what we've been talking about, is I was actually getting groceries, and I was pushing the cart, and my daughter was in the cart. So I'm walking past the beer aisle in the grocery store, and she points out and goes, "Daddy, that's a beer for you." And she's like, "The one with the cat on the label." And that was her entire logic was, oh, there's a cat on the label. And
so they're marketing to kids. That's basically what you're saying.
Yeah, right? Oh, wow. That's a whole other topic we can get into. But the reason it resonated with me when I was preparing for this was, I've already got someone telling me exactly what I want and what I like. So I don't necessarily need AI to be telling me. I've already got my 4-year-old doing that.
That's awesome. Well, you're going to have to crack that baby open and let us know how it tastes, but we won't put you on the spot to have to do that right now. But okay, well, I think this moves to the closing here. So I just want to thank you, Matt, for coming on the podcast this week, and thanks to everyone who's listened to this point. Thanks, Mom, for getting to hear, and so be sure to subscribe, rate and review, and stay connected with us on LinkedIn at Revenue Pulse RP, and join our newsletter, coincidentally or not coincidentally, called Launch Codes, where you can stay up to date on all the things that we're talking about. But until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep being amazing. And we'll see you soon.